استفن اعدام‌ها در ایران، ترور دولتی برای سرکوب مخالفان و بازگرداندن کنترل در پی دو خیزش سراسری و درگیری بین المللی اخیر است. آمار اعدام در ایران در سال 2025 از هر زمان دیگری در تاریخ معاصر به جز فاجعه هولناک سال 1988 که 30,000 زندانی سیاسی تنها به دلیل پافشاری بر عقیده‌شان به یک اپوزیسیون دموکراتیک اعدام شدند، فراتر رفته است. من به عنوان یک دادستان سابق بین المللی که مسئول محکومیت عاملان نسل کشی رواندا و سپس جنایات جمعی در سیرالئون بودم میتوانم بگویم اقدامات رژیم جنایت علیه بشریت و جنایت علیه قوانین بشری هستند.
Thank you very much for being here today and for that warm welcome. But of course, we meet at a time when Iran's judiciary has unleashed a torrent of executions. Others have provided the figure, but the increase is notable. 850 in 2023, almost 1,000 last year, and as we heard from the chair, 1,932 so far this year, with 21 days left in 2025. And as Madam Rejui told us, 335 executed in November alone. That is 11 of our fellow human beings every day. 11 persons whose breathing was crushed, whose necks were broken, whose lives were taken at the end of the rope. And that continues today. These are persons accused of vague crimes like enmity against God, or condemned for affiliations with groups rather than any actual offenses. These judicial executions, these judicial murders are not just sporadic. They're calculated measures. They are acts of state terror to suppress dissent and to reassert control in the aftermath of two nationwide uprisings and the recent international conflict. Iran's execution tally for 2025 exceeds any in modern memory except for the horror of 1988. And let us not forget that horror. 30,000 political prisoners executed in a brief period for holding on to their belief in a democratic opposition. The death commissions for those atrocities are now being praised for their brutality. This summer, the Far's news agency, a mouthpiece of the Revolutionary Guards, published a chilling editorial heralding the commissions as a successful historical experience. I can say as a former international prosecutor, responsible for convicting persons for the Rwanda genocide, and then for the mass atrocities in Sierra Leone, that these are crimes against humanity, crimes against the code of humankind. But as someone experienced in bringing international criminals to justice, I know accountability is slow, but it is never impossible. Iran's rulers may rely on impunity today, but with sustained pressure, tomorrow they can face justice, either before their own citizens or in an international tribunal yet to be established. Other situations have seemed similarly impossible. As you heard, I just returned from Syria, where I spent 5 days on my 5th visit in the last year. I was there to continue my work with Syrians on transitional justice, and this time to join in the commemoration of the first anniversary of the liberation in boisterous celebrations that went on for days, sharing an exhilaration greater than any that I have known in my 76 years. Joyfully remembering a day that Syrians feared would never happen, but it did. Syria teaches us that an end to tyranny is possible and that justice can prevail. But how did it happen? Like Iran, there was no tribunal to go to, but we showed that justice was still possible. Syria was ruled by a vicious regime that earlier in this decade seemed to most of the world to have won the war against its own people. And the brutal oppression by a national regime that destroyed the homes of half the population, driving the survivors into exile, killing more than 600,000 of its own people, 1/3 by disappearance in the dead of night, the detention centers packed with underground dungeons where there was torture and then murder, and 140,000 victims of those crimes are now in an estimated 250 mass graves. There were others killed in bombardment of civilian neighborhoods and hospitals and all the means that sustain life. But again, there was no international court to go to. Referral to the ICC was blocked by Russia and Chinese vetoes, as certainly a referral of Iran to the ICC would be as well. But the prospect of accountability was kept alive by the strong support in Europe, in North America, and elsewhere of civil society investigations on the ground as the crimes were being committed, of international mechanisms that built strong cases, strong enough to convict some of the torturers, the colonels, and now generals in foreign courts under universal jurisdiction, and to obtain warrants for others, including President Assad himself. And now a change in Syria, not by international military intervention, but by Syrians themselves, more complete justice is possible. So these are the lessons for our dealings with Iran. The rights, the human rights of the victims and survivors are not negotiable. In the past, we held out hope the regime could change itself from within. These hopes even led to forgetting the survivors of the regime's crimes. Once, sadly, to join in falsely targeting the regime's most effective opposition, the PMOI, as terrorists. We need to resolve to never let that happen again. As it was with Syria, our message must be clear. If you commit these crimes, the mullahs are committing today, there will be no rest in this life. The day will come when the cell door will bang behind you and you will face trial before your survivors. What is needed is more than words. On this 77th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, we must commit ourselves to never again trade away human rights and justice, even for promises on uranium enrichment. That doesn't mean one doesn't have tough negotiations on issues like arms control, like we did during the Cold War with the Soviet regime. But that did not stop our active support of the regime's dissidents. And certainly what we heard from Madam Rejvi about insisting before we sit down with any of the representatives of this regime that there be a moratorium on these daily killings. We must support the right of the Iranian people to replace it and for the victims and survivors to have justice. That means more than under-resourced rapporteurs or fact-finding missions. It means a commitment to fund active documentation of these crimes, including of the complicity of non-Iranian actors who are aiding their commission, to develop evidence that meets the high standards of proof in judicial processes, to support private prosecutions of civil parties and public ones by judicial officials, and to back it up by not surrendering the custody when the regime brings pressures to bear. The world's regime, the world's resolve, will be measured not by words, but by whether Iran's 2025 becomes another 1988 or a turning point towards justice. Thank you very much.